everyone. This is Henny Espinosa with Just Dish Foundation. Today, we are so honored that we are joined by a photographer from Birmingham, Alabama, who's using his skills to recognize our war heroes who are in the twilight of their lives with their captured images. And, not just for themselves to enjoy, but for their family and for the rest of the community as well. So thank you so much for joining us, Jeff Reese. And of course, who he will tell us about his project, Portraits of Honor. Hello, Jeff.
Hi.
Oh, so Jeff, tell us a little bit about your background and kind of how service has always been in your family.
Well, as far as military service, I'm not a veteran myself, but there are a lot of veterans in my family, starting with my dad, who was a paratrooper in the Korean War, Army Airborne, and I then have my one of my brothers was in the Marine Corps for about 20 years, and my own son, my oldest son, is a Marine Corps veteran, 5 years. But also going back to World War II, is I have at least a couple of uncles who served during World War II, and but one of them was my mom's brother, who unfortunately was killed in combat. He was in the Coast Guard, and actually on a destroyer escorting convoys of ships across the Atlantic, and they had to go in large convoys and zigzagging back and forth across the Atlantic to avoid German submarines. And unfortunately, one of those hit his ship, and all but 28 of the crew were killed, or probably many of them drowned in the cold North Atlantic waters.
Hmm. So there's always this sense of patriotism and valuing of service in your family. In your community, is there a big veteran population?
I don't know if it's probably not any larger here in relation to most places. I'm sure California, Florida, Texas, New York areas are probably have a lot more veterans, but there are quite a few here,
Mhm.
and that helped me be able to get started on this project.
And it's sometimes in smaller communities too, you can really, I don't know, you feel like the veterans, I mean, in a lot of communities in the country too, as it should be, veterans are honored. But in smaller towns, you kind of, I don't know, you feel that sense of community. You feel that, you know what I mean? And then
Yeah, definitely.
and
We just
to see those veterans, many of them are really in the twilight of their lives, still out and about and inspiring the younger generation. I think that's something. So tell us a little bit about your career as a photographer. How did you get into it? And what kind of satisfaction does it give you being a photographer?
Well, I didn't start out as a photographer. My career was as a graphic designer and art director, and for many years, although I did have an interest in photography going back to high school, I guess, but I didn't do anything with it professionally, and you know, nothing more than just as a hobby. With my job as a art director, I would hire photographers to do jobs that needed to be done for the companies I was working for. And eventually, with when digital photography became the norm, I was able to, at least through my work, get the equipment I needed to where I could do it on my own instead of hiring those photographers. Um, and eventually, I would do that on the side, kind of a second job on the side. And when my art directing job last ended, I fell back to that uh, job as a photographer, and I've been doing that ever since 2017.
Wow. And okay, so what led you describe first kind of the kinds of work that you would do before, and kind of what led you to this project, the Portraits of Honor.
I did a lot of portrait photography, just shooting pictures of families and weddings and uh, just about anything I could get paid for. But and I, in developing a portfolio, one time I thought, well, I've got some time. I'd like to try something new, and I had seen where acquaintances had over in the UK and elsewhere had photographed a few World War II veterans, and I really liked the way that they were doing that. And I wondered if maybe I could find somebody locally that I could do the same for, and thought it would be, just something for my portfolio, maybe find one or two, and that would be it. But once I found that first one, it was a local gentleman who was 99 years old and a Marine Corps veteran, Colonel Carl Cooper, and was able to sit down with him and hear his stories. It just made sense that I would really continue to do this for as long as I could and meet as many as I could. And I wanted to do it as my way of using my talent to give something back to them, to thank them for what they did and all their sacrifices that they made. So that's where we are now.
So when you first approached your first World War II veteran to take a portrait of, how did they respond to it? Were they immediately open to it? Like, what was that like for you, the very first few veterans that you approached?
I didn't know if they would be that open to it or not, but thankfully, I was able to track this gentleman down. I saw him on the news, and he was being honored at a football game halftime and wearing his dress blue uniforms, and I thought he would be absolutely perfect for me to reach out to. So I reached out to the news guy who first reported it, and then he gave me a name, and that guy gave me the name of the veteran's nephew. Um, and I explained what I wanted to do, even though I didn't have anything to really show exactly what I wanted to do, but they were open to it. And I met him at the veteran's home, the veteran's house where he lived, and um, it was just went perfectly. I was humbled. I was sitting there. He was still getting his uniform on for the portrait, which he was in the Marine Corps for 38 years, so he still had the uniform that he retired in. And I was feeling a little nervous about it, but he asked me, could I help him put his collar on? The Marine Corps uniform has a really stiff collar, and he needed a little help to put that on. And my hands were shaking. I was afraid I would pinch him or something, but we did that, and that was really humbling. But it also put me a little more at ease and able to bond with him, I think.
And a lot of them have really, can really still have wonderful memories or moments that they cannot forget about that time that they served. Even though it was a challenging, dark period for a lot of people, but they, at least the veterans that I've also spoken with, they really remember the brotherhood, the camaraderie with fellow
Yeah.
veterans. And when you capture their images through your lens, like what do you see?
I think most of all, I see a lot of pride, and, a good pride that, they were happy to be able to serve their country and do what they could do. Because at that time, everybody was pitching in to do something, and they were more than glad to do whatever they had to serve the country. A
Mhm.
lot of patriotism, still evident, 75, 80 years later. And um, that's what, even if these veterans, have, a bit of memory problems, most of them can remember what they did
Yeah.
back then. And those are, just clear and vivid memories. And, for the most part, they're happy to share that, and happy to, for other people to know what they went through.
So speaking of letting other people know what they went through, what do you think this project does for the younger generation? When they see these images of these war heroes, and they know of their stories also through the portraits that you capture. What do you think does this do for the younger generation in terms of looking at the past so that we can move forward in the future?
Well, just that. I hope it teaches them uh, what these what these gentlemen and women did during that time. They don't call it the greatest generation for nothing. They went through so much, from the Great Depression to wartime, and then starting their own families and careers afterwards. It's I hope that the younger generation will hear it and see it and understand a little bit better than just reading a story.
Mhm.
Uh, they can actually see some of that pride and patriotism in the faces of these veterans that are photographed.
Mhm. Mhm. Where do you hope to bring this project, Jeff? How do you hope to, because you said you started it with a few veterans. It was just supposed to be part of your portfolio, and now it's become this big project, and the community's invested in it as well. The people are also reaching out to help you. How do you want to move this project forward?
I'll keep doing it as long as I can, as long as I can find and get to veterans. And, it won't be but a few years before they're all gone, because probably the average age of them right now is 97, 98 years old. I've the oldest one I've photographed is 107,
Wow.
and the youngest right now is probably 95. Um, so I'll keep doing it, and I have leads, hundreds of leads all around the country. As people have heard about this and seen the story of my project on, such as this, and word has spread. And when I go and every time I photograph a veteran, I'll share it on social media or the website, and as well as interviews with the veterans. And it is kind of word of mouth. People will see that and reach out to me and say, "Hey, I have a father or a grandfather or uncle or whoever, and can you come to Pennsylvania or Arizona or wherever and meet them?" So as I have the funds, I'll and the time, I'll continue to do that.
Hmm. Maybe more exhibits and a book, maybe, or a
Well,
documentary.
that's interesting because a filmmaker in California is very interested in wanting to do a documentary on the project, and that hasn't taken off yet, but we're not giving up on that. And as far as a book, that never was my intention, but now I'm convinced that I will do a book of some kind, even if it's self-published. I'll create something and see where that goes.
Yeah.
That's a goal for the next year.
I think the important thing is to document the stories, capture their images while we still can, while they're still around. And truly, we applaud you for doing that, Jeff. And we at Just Wish Foundation, we've always valued causes that support the veterans. And so in our own little way, we want to help you. Because I know it costs it has some cost to do the things that you do, but we want to support you in any way that we can through monetary donation. And we're here if you need us, and we just want to applaud you for doing it is that you're doing and honoring our veterans. They truly deserve it.
Well, thank you so much. It means a lot. It really does. And it's not, recognition for me doing anything. I just want to get more of their stories out there, because it's so important to hear from any or all of these veterans, not just those who are in the news a lot, but hearing from those who might not have been in the infantry or pilots or something, might have driven a truck or been a cook or a medic. And I want as many of those to get the recognition and their stories out there as possible, as many as possible, because they all have their own stories, their own sacrifices, and it's important that we share that and as many people hear it and see it as possible.
Truly. Thank you so much, Jeff.
You're welcome. Thank you.